Seahawks win 23-20, and they improve to 2-0 on the season. It's so weird not having some sort of games, series against a team to say afterwards because of all the baseball stuff, but that's not how football works, for better or for worse. Mostly better. Go over the scoring plays. Husky legend Jalen Polk, and I'm not being facetious there, maybe a little. Really good player. 5-yard touchdown connection with Jacoby Brissett to make it 7-0. Seahawks answer immediately back. DK Metcalf, a 56-yard connection from Geno Smith. 7-7 at the end of the first quarter. Second quarter, Joey Sly connects on a 29-yard field goal. Zach Charbonnet answers back with a 1-yard touchdown run. 14-10 in the middle of the second. Joey Sly gets another field goal a little bit before the 2-minute warning to make it 14-13 Seahawks. And Jason Myers at the buzzer, a 44-yard connection, 17-13 at the half. Nothing happens in the fourth quarter, at least in terms of scoring. But Ramondre Stevenson gets a 1-yard touchdown run to give the Patriots a 3-point lead. And just before, well, not really, 1 minute left, Jason Myers connects on a 38-yard field goal to tie the game at 20-20. And in overtime, after having a hold by the defense, Jason Myers, 31-yard field goal, 23-20. Seahawks get the win. Not a lot of negatives to talk about from this game. We didn't have a ton to talk about in week one, and we don't have a ton to talk about in week two, but they're similar negatives. The interior of the offensive line just looks awful. Anthony Bradford, Laken Tomlinson, and Connor Williams have just not been up to snuff. And we give Williams a little bit of a pass because of the fact that he missed so much time and he's kind of working his way back. But man, and it's worth pointing out, there looked to be some miscommunication stuff, and that often falls on the center. There were a couple of times where Geno was blitzed and there was just nobody there. And, some of that could be on Geno. Some of it could be on Gerard Mayo, terrific defensive mind, creating a situation like that. A lot of times it's on the center. But as much as that's frustrating, it's much more frustrating with how he's played. Like that one play where he even tried to hold the guy's leg to prevent the sack. He's just been worked. Anthony Bradford hasn't played well and had a very costly penalty, a silly, silly penalty that took away a chance for a score or at least a touchdown. Got to be better. Tomlinson got beat up too. Now, look, the Patriots are a good defense. The Broncos have their key players as well. They played well against the Steelers. That offense is just a joke. Wow, it's bad. But they're going to have to be better in part because, look, the Seahawks have played two of the worst offenses in football, in my personal opinion, in terms of talent so far. I think you could argue that in terms of skill set and because Bo Nix doesn't look ready, may never be ready, but in terms of skill set, I would argue that the Broncos are probably last, and if they're not last, they're awfully close. The Patriots ain't much better. So you've been able to get those 23 points, 26 points, and that's not bad. At some point, you're going to have to score a bunch, and it's going to be really hard to score a bunch if your interior of the line is playing this poorly. They've got to get better. I don't know how they get better outside of maybe Christian Haynes being the answer to addressing one of those situations. It's still not good. It's still not a very good offensive line at all. Other negatives. Noah Fant had a tough game. In fact, a couple of receivers had not such great efforts. Now, we'll talk about the positive as well. But Fant with a couple of drops. One guy that's an extreme positive had a terrible drop. Got to be better in that regard, obviously. I thought that the linebackers were outstanding in week one against the Broncos. They had some issues, especially covering the tight end. And what was infuriating about it was, as much as I love Jalen Polk, and it was great to see him score a touchdown, the Patriots wideouts are garbage. And not seeing them able to contain the tight end, a position they probably should have bracketed a little bit more. Now they made the adjustment, and Hunter Henry's amazing first half turned into just a pedestrian second. But it was a little frustrating to see him wide open quite a bit. And whether that's completely on the linebackers, it's worth pointing out that Jerome Baker dealt with injury in this game, as he has a lot in the past and he dealt with this summer. But I didn't think the linebackers were quite as up to snuff. There's an exception to that I'll talk about in the positive section. Got to be better a little bit there defensively. And then the one thing I wanted to talk about that's a potential negative, but I actually agreed with it, was I wanted to talk about the decision not to go for it on fourth down. And normally, look, I understand there's a time and place for feel, and I think that time and place for feel was Sunday. Because normally what I would say is you're absolutely going for it on 4th and inches. Absolutely 100%. The chance to get the touchdown there and not turn it into a literal coin flip almost. Literal might actually just work there. I'd prefer to go for it and go try and get those 6 points. However, after watching how this interior of the offensive line was blown up, I don't blame them whatsoever, because if you guys remember back to when they went for it on 4th and 1 earlier in the contest, I mean, Zach Charbonnet had just no chance. No chance whatsoever. So I actually turning that negative into a positive. It's a negative that they felt like they couldn't get that inch or inches. I think it's a positive, though, that Mike McDonald went with feel there and said, you know what? I believe that this team, number one, is not going to give up a touchdown to this offense. They'd already given up 2. They weren't getting 3. And I also know that my offensive line is struggling so badly right now that it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to go for it. Now, ideally, just QB sneak. Just sneak it. You don't have to even do the tush push. Just fall forward. Geno Smith's a big dude. He can get that extra little bit. But I also understand keeping Geno Smith healthy, and I understand, there's some offensive systems that just don't like the quarterback sneak. So I actually think it's a little bit of a negative that they weren't able to go for it there, and a little bit of a positive that they looked at not just the nerd math, and there's nothing wrong with nerd math. Nerd math wins championships. It helps a lot. Now, it's not the only reason, but it's an important part of every sport. Analytics are a huge part of every damn sport. No matter who your favorite team is, there is somebody in that organization that is giving you information that is based on math. That's just 100% the fact. Doesn't matter the sport. Anyway, I do think it was great to see Mike McDonald went with feel there rather than just with this is what the book says. You know what my book says? Always shop at simplyseattle.com, because you can get great stuff for, of course, the Seahawks, but also the Mariners, the Huskies, the Cougars, the Sounders, Storm. By the way, saying Cougars absolutely broke my heart there a little bit. You can find it all at Simply Seattle. Kraken, of course. And then use code MOLLYWOP15, MOLLYWHOP15. It's a great deal from great people. I can't thank the people of Simply Seattle enough for sponsoring the show. Link in the description. Really appreciate the support. Once again, MOLLY, and then the website is simplyseattle.com. I have no idea what I was just saying there. I am exhausted. So just before, because I'll forget it, because I wanted to bring it up, I thought Tyrese Knight, after coming into the game, was fantastic. And you see why that team liked that guy so much. His instincts are so good. Made a couple of nice plays in pass coverage. I think that's the ultimate worry here, is how great he's going to be in coverage, or even good he's going to be in coverage. But I think he did a very nice job filling in, and for his first time for real action being in that game, I was pretty impressed. And Tyrell Dodson is a star. I'm going that far. I think Tyrell Dodson is a absolute star. Didn't have his best game, but still made enough plays. I thought that the interior pass rush was really good today. Great job by Leonard Williams. Congratulations to Byron Murphy on his first half a sack. Half a sacks are absolutely ridiculous, by the way. But you get 3 sacks. Boye Mafe. The only negative with Boye Mafe is, boy, did he make a mistake on that little pitch that he should have absolutely tackled for a 5 or 6 yard loss. Outside of that, he played a fantastic game. I thought the interior of the line played really well. You can't really talk about the cornerbacks too much because they just weren't targeted. But that's also a positive because it just shows you, number one, okay, sure. It shows that the Patriots are not exactly confident in their passing attack right now. But it also just shows you that the Seattle Seahawks have shut down corners. And they both, Devin Witherspoon made a couple of penalties on the same drive that didn't need to happen. It's hard to get too mad at that dude. And he made some nice plays as a run defender. So underrated in that regard. Maybe not underrated, but he's so good in that. It's not the first thing you think of when you think of Devin Witherspoon. And I'm not saying it should. I'm just saying that there are very few corners who do a better job in that regard. He was fantastic in that regard. Didn't really get a chance to shine otherwise. Same with Tariq Woolen, excuse me. And I should start calling him Reek Woolen. I apologize. Sorry, Reek. Just so used to calling you Tariq. Have so many of your rookie cards that say Tariq Woolen. So in that regard. Zach Charbonnet, the numbers aren't great. In fact, they're not even close. I actually think he did a pretty nice little job. He didn't get much space, and he doesn't have the tackle missability so far that Kenneth Walker does. Walker a year older, but Walker showed more of it, to be fair, in his rookie and second year, to be sure. But I think he took advantage of, or made the most, is what I should say, of not a lot of creases. And he ran hard, and that mattered. Running hard matters. Zach Charbonnet pretty much realized that couldn't be too patient, because if you were patient, you were getting snuffed. And he fell forward enough to help them out. Had a really nice run. Best run of the day, I think. The touchdown was nice, but best run of the day was on that overtime drive to set up the touchdown. And he was also a nice receiver out of the backfield as well. Caught all 5 of his targets. Ryan Grubb mentioned that they really like him as a receiver. He's a solid player. Would I have used a second-round pick on him? No, I wouldn't have used a second-round pick on Kenneth Walker either. I am a guy who believes that you can find running backs later in drafts or sign free agents. And I don't want to say they're disposable. I just don't believe in using top 50 picks on running backs, or top 60 picks. I don't remember exactly where Charbonnet was, but Walker was definitely a top 45 pick. But I thought he did pretty well. It was interesting to see that they just didn't use McIntosh or George Holani at all, which I think shows a little bit of a lack of trust there, particularly in McIntosh as a pass blocker. I didn't see the snap count yet, but I don't recall seeing him in. A lot of empty sets too. But if Walker can't go, if you're playing fantasy, Zach Charbonnet, he is definitely someone to look at, just because he's going to see the overwhelming, even if McIntosh or Holani get some touches next week against the Dolphins, the overwhelming percentage of touches are going to Charbonnet. And against a pretty stout run defense with a pretty crappy interior offensive line, I think he did a nice job. The receiving core, Jake Bobo catches both of his targets. Laviska Shenault, I think they'd really like to make him a thing. I've just seen too much of him not being a thing. I'd rather see those targets going elsewhere. Now, look, the other guys are going to receive all the attention, so Chenault's going to get some opportunities, some one-on-one, and you can get him the ball in the screen game or jet sweeps or whatever. He just hasn't shown me enough as a professional. I loved him out of Colorado. He just it has not translated. I'd rather see those touches going elsewhere. maybe a little bit to Jake Bobo. Very different players, but Bobo and Chenault did their thing. Very uninvolved game from Tyler Lockett, which was a little surprising to see, but did come up with a huge pass interference call. Caught both of his targets. We will probably look. I don't. Let's just get into it. DK Metcalf and Jackson Smith and Jigba were fantastic today. Now, Smith and Jigba did have one huge drop, and it was very frustrating because it was a perfect throw. But it's hard to complain about 12 catches for 117 yards. And then DK Metcalf, 10 catches for 129 yards with the touchdown. A little bit of a busted coverage there, but DK Metcalf makes the most of busted coverages. And I thought those two in particular were fantastic. And I think there might have been a little extra attention for Lockett to open things up for Smith and Jigba. My only thing, and maybe I could have mentioned this in the negative, is I believe Jackson Smith and Jigba still isn't being used 100% correctly. There's still a little bit too much. Like, I get it. Get him the ball. Hope that his speed can make plays. I'd like to see more downfield stuff. Now, the one real chance he had at a downfield play, he didn't make it. But I think he is better than this short yardage, or short yardage isn't the right term, but short yard target guy. I want to see him get down the field more. I believe he can run all the necessary routes to do that. I saw it at Ohio State. I've seen it in flashes as a Seahawk. I want to see Jackson Smith get the ball a little bit deeper down the field. Some of that, though, has to do with the fact that Geno Smith just didn't have time to do that. So Ryan Grubb made the early adjustment. In fact, it wasn't even an adjustment. He knew that this interior is just not very good right now. And there was a lot of short stuff. And which leads to the ultimate positive. As good as Smith and Jigba was, and as good as DK was, that's probably the best I've seen Geno Smith play. He was just so accurate with everything, and he could have had a much better day if not for 5 drops. But his accuracy and the ability to get rid of the ball quickly and efficiently was fantastic. He made one bad throw that I count. And, he got hit a little bit on it, but it was a silly throw that could have easily ended up a pick. It was not completely dissimilar to the interception that he threw against Denver. But really, since that pick, Geno Smith has played fantastic. And I think some people know I am not a huge believer in Geno Smith as a franchise quarterback. I also don't necessarily believe you have to have a franchise quarterback to be a really good football team. You have to have a good one. And I think Geno Smith is closer to good than average. I think he's a top dozen quarterback. Now, he played a lot better than that today. At times against Denver, he played a lot better than that as well. Are there times he holds on to the ball a little too long? Sure. That was true about the guy who replaced him. That'll be true about the guy who replaces Geno Smith in a couple of years. That's just the way it works. Quarterbacks want to make the big play. But I will tell you this, if there was ever an example today of the nonsense, and here's me at my most anti-analytics, the idea that sacks are a quarterback stat, sometimes yes. A lot of times, no. No. Geno Smith was in trouble today. All 3 of those sacks were cases where, maybe one of them, he tried to buy it a little bit too much time. But the other times were, number one, that horrible busted, not coverage, but busted protection scheme. And then another one where the interior just got blown up. So sacks are sometimes the quarterback's fault, and a lot of times bad offensive line play, and a lot of times great defensive line play. There's a reason why defensive linemen get paid a lot of money and get drafted very early. Not last year because it was a bad class for it, but a lot of times that's the case. Anyway, long story short, Geno Smith was fantastic. And if he plays like he did today, the Seattle Seahawks are going to contend for this division. Absolutely will contend for this division. So you're 2-0, and I believe you're the only 2-0 team in the division. Should probably look at that. Yep. I don't know why I had it was pretty easy. You watched the Cardinals absolutely shellac mollywop the Rams today, and then San Francisco loses to Minnesota. Hey, the Sam Darnold resurgence. But you're 2-0. Now your schedule gets a little more interesting. Again, great to win games. You have not played the very best football teams. Now you take on a Miami team, though, that just got its you know what kicked and has a real question mark at quarterback. Be fascinated and a little bit nervous to see what they do at quarterback because of the Tua Tagovailoa situation. Tua Tagovailoa situation. Because I know what I would do. I'm not risking that guy's life. But they're saying it's ultimately his decision, and football players are often stubborn. Tough, stubborn. Anyway, even if it's Skylar Thompson, there are a lot of weapons on that Miami roster. And, not the best defense, but okay. This will certainly be their toughest game of the year. And fortunately, it comes at home. It comes at home. And then you got a real tough one on Monday against the Lions, although I do believe the Lions lost today. It was a long day today. I covered baseball, covered football. Now I'm recording this, and I got another Mile Y thing to record tonight. Fun, but very tiresome. Anyway, could have stopped saying anyway as much as I do. It's great to be 2-0. It's so important. So important. The history of teams that start 2-0, it's not infallible, but it's gives you such a head start. Such a head start. And now, we talked about the schedule last week. We might as well talk about it again. You get the Dolphins, the Lions, the Giants, who stink. The 49ers, who did not look great today. Still a tough one, though. But no Christian McCaffrey. I think Christian McCaffrey will be back for that game, though, if he's able to come off IR. But, 4-2 looking a heck of a lot more likely. And a slim chance of 5-1. I know that seems anti-positive, but I still believe they'll probably lose two of these next four, excuse me. Hope they don't. And if Skylar Thompson is the quarterback for Miami, the chance of you winning that game goes up considerably. All due respect to Skylar Thompson. Please hit like, please hit subscribe. I so appreciate the support. You guys are the best. I'm so thrilled that you guys have not just hiss-booed me doing this recap so far. Now, there's only been 2. There's plenty of time for it. But awesome win. And once again, Geno Smith, phenomenal game. Oh, and by the way, I hate you, New England. You ruined my childhood. I wasn't really a child when that game happened, but I hate you. I love you,